Good evening and welcome to Takeover AU, Takeover Television, Takeover TV, call it what you like. Tonight, tomorrow afternoon, the morning, whenever you happen to be watching, this is the Takeover Footy Wrap, where we look into the footy and the AFL, what's been happening in the last week or two, what's going to be happening. There's plenty on. And in case you haven't guessed, we are broadcasting from the great state of infection known as Victoria. I'm Sergio Paradise, and I'm joined by three of the great cult figures of AFL and AFL broadcasting. Firstly, legendary podcaster, broadcaster, and mad Saints man. It's, of course, Mark Finey Fine.
Oh, that's better, Serge.
Yeah. And Collingwood legend, the Incredible Hulk, Rene Kink.
Great to be back, Steve. Thank you.
And, of course, Hawthorn hard man, that's how we have to always introduce him, is the great Campbell Brown. And as I say, they're all cult figures. In fact, you could almost describe them as a pack of cults. And we're here to discuss the footy. What's been going on? What's taken your mind the last couple of days, gentlemen?
I'm glad you said cults and not another word. How are you, everyone?
Very well, Brownie.
Yeah, we live in a strange place, don't we? In fact, very strange, because out your window it's night time, Brownie, and out Serge's window it's daytime. Well, I've got a terrible feeling that Melbourne is sort of orbiting in a different plane to the rest of the world.
I think so.
We've been jettisoned.
So. Now we've just started the Melbourne Port Adelaide game, which is the second game of 33 matches in 20 days. Before we get onto those and what's going to happen and what is not going to happen, and we don't quite know, let's just go back on a few of the games from the last round. What about you, Rene? You cast a pretty,
Well, let's jump on the first game, Steve. Of course, Collingwood Eagles. Very disappointing from my point of view. The Collingwood side started off 20 points up, looking very, very sharp, and next minute, for some reason, they just stood back and watched the Eagles, especially their midfielders, take control. A big loss with Pendlebury out straight away, right from the start. That was a real loss to Collingwood, because he's a leader and he also shapes the side through the middle. And of course, with the ruck, Natanui, he was just fantastic. The other guy as well, their other ruckman, and they absolutely gave Grundy a hammering. So it was a really bad night for Collingwood.
It seems to be a few of these games. Like, there was a bit like Richmond and the Bulldogs last night, that teams will have a great week, like the Bulldogs did the last week before, and then they come up and they really struggle. Like Collingwood have been playing pretty well, but as you say, they got pumped by the Eagles the other night.
Mm. Yeah, well, it's a very interesting season. We don't have to talk about how interesting it is, and of course, Port Adelaide to St Kilda. Once again, it was an interesting game until the last quarter. It could have gone either way. So all the games so far this year are very telling as to who's going to win the games, particularly getting into the second part of the season now.
I'll tell you something about Collingwood. It's a simple mathematical formula. Collingwood minus Howe, minus De Goey, minus Pendlebury. Pretty ordinary conveyance. But
side bottom.
And side bottom as well, of course. So would any other team be. You're talking about certainly that mid-sized forward, whether it's De Goey, whether it's Toby Green, whether it's Dustin Martin going forward at Richmond, that is the power forward of 2020. So to lose De Goey, to lose Pendlebury on top of Howe and side bottom, well, extenuating circumstances, and playing, a real premiership contender, if not favourite, on their home patch. They blew out in the finish, maybe almost predictable.
Yeah, what I loved about the Eagles, all their key midfielders and key on-ballers from last year, the year before, really, really have stood up, and they're going to be a real power to beat.
Yeah, with the draw. How about, did you watch the St Kilda Port game, guys? Campbell, did you see in the first quarter Dan Butler grabbed the ball near the boundary and he tried that sort of Dacos kick around the corner, and it skidded because it was a bit dewy, and it just hit the inside of the post.
Yeah.
That was the only point St Kilda scored for the entire game.
Yeah, no, they were efficient, weren't they? They were sensational. They're just building something very nice there, the Saners, and that was a big scalp, Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, and it can give them plenty of a lot of confidence. But the Doggies last night, I don't reckon they've actually beaten anyone. They beat up on the Sydney Swans. They beat, Essendon. I think they towed up North Melbourne and Bruce kicked 6. He hasn't had a kick since. So it was a good test for them last night as well, and they were found wanting against a depleted Richmond side. So it's a bit of a funny season, but I think form now is just starting to take shape a little bit now that we're a fair few rounds in.
Yeah, I reckon.
West Coast, Richmond and Brisbane.
Yep.
The Tigers were a bit scary last night. It was bad. Nice to see Dusty. How good was he when he's back in form? He's a freak of nature, is he not?
Yeah, 2 of his 3 goals were just magnificent, weren't they? So, and they've got a lot of good young kids that have been, we probably haven't seen a lot of, but Noah Bolter and Egg Malesi Smith and Shea Bolton and all these guys, they've been just doing their apprenticeship at VFL level for a couple of years, and when they get the opportunity, they just slot straight in and still play. They probably play a more exciting brand than some of the Richmond senior players because they've got a bit more leg speed.
Yeah, well, see, Dustin Martin last night, I think he's now almost at Isaac Rankin standard, the way he played last night.
Yeah, they get excited pretty quickly now in footy, don't they?
Oh, we do.
Now, something happened in last night's game. It didn't matter. Of course, the final result was never in doubt. But there was, just after half-time, I guess if the Doggies were going to mount a challenge, they played some decent footy in the first 5 to 10 minutes after half-time. And there's a rule in football that I think is ridiculous. And it absolutely bit them on the backside. As I said, doesn't affect the result. Now, Wallace takes a mark and he's got a knock above the eye.
Yeah.
He's going back to have a kick. By the rules of the game, nobody's allowed within 15 metres of him. So the trickle of blood above his eye he should be allowed to have that kick. He had to go off, and Billy Gowers, who had not had a single kick for the night, took the kick, sprayed it, and Wallace, who kicked 3 goals, it's fair to say probably would have put that through, and it would have been back-to-back goals for the Doggies and something to build on. Now, it doesn't affect the result because they get pantsed. But I don't like that rule. What do you reckon, Campbell, Rene, and Serge?
It's a good point you make. Yeah, he's turned himself into a really dangerous mid-sized forward, hasn't he? Almost resurrected his career, Mitch Wallace. And he must have worked hard on his goal kicking because he really makes the most of his opportunities. And you're right. If they were ever to mount a challenge, it was on the back of just getting a bit of momentum there. And I think that the umpire should have allowed him just to wipe the eye, go back, take the shot, and then go off. So when Gower sprayed it to the right, that was the end of him, wasn't it? I
couldn't agree more, Finey. I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago in a similar situation. I remember the blood rule came in back when AIDS was like a worldwide health problem, and nobody wanted the transfer of blood be accidental or deliberate in any situation. Could have put the HIV virus across. Now that's not a real issue. Now the blood rule I think is purely an aesthetic rule because it's not a good look for kids and families to see players with blood everywhere. Okay,
but it does attract vampires to the game, which is a positive.
Well,
Rene used to love a bit of claret, didn't you, mate?
Hammer.
I created a bit of claret, Campbell. I never wore any of it myself personally, but
listen to those two.
On 23 occasions, I did cause a little bit of that, but it's a little bit of a perplexing sort of issue, the blood rule. And Finey's right, in a situation like that, it possibly shouldn't have happened. So. But we're finding that with a lot of rules, particularly the one I'm really grinding at the moment about is this so-called over the boundary line deliberately.
Yeah.
And we're all seeing it when these players in these slippery conditions up there in Queensland, particularly with this light rain, Perth and everywhere, when a player's trying his hardest to get the ball moving forward, and that's what we want, get the ball out of the packs. And the umpire's calling all these, deliberate calls over the boundary line. And it's just making me really wild because it's not the case. They're defenders. They're working hard. Middle players are working hard. And stupid penalty because it's deliberate. Well, honestly.
I don't know how many times over the last month or so I've yelled at the TV screen. That umpire does not understand how the game is actually played.
Correct.
I mean, sometimes it's just a shank, or it's a slippery ball off the side of the boot, or it's a handball that's come off the wrong part of the hand. It wasn't.
It's ridiculous.
It was just an accidentally poor disposal.
In the St Kilda Adelaide game, at the start of the game, Dan Butler got the ball on the wing, and he fell over as he tried to kick it. And he tripped over his own feet, and the ball ricocheted off one of his knees as he was falling over. The umpire paid intentional. I mean, they've got to have a deliberate
move. Yeah,
they've got to have some. First of all, I just want to go through the rule. It's normally when an umpire pays a free kick, right? He stands there, plants his legs, blows the whistle, and indicates which way the free kick is, and will indicate what sort of free it is, holding the ball, holding the man, something like that. For some reason, this intentional out of bounds, the umpire runs to the scene of the crime and along the way pretends to run somebody out underarm. It's a very interesting dynamic. I think he's running because it's actually the one decision the crowd, above all other decisions, the crowd makes.
Yeah.
They yell for it. And half the crowd yells intentional, and the other half yells deliberate. And they're not.
It's the opposition.
What's being said?
But it's hilarious the way they run in with that underarm.
Yeah,
it's like a sweep. It's like a right.
It's the only free kick they run towards.
Yeah, I think just jumping here, the other thing that's a real issue is. As we look at the game with Melbourne, when he took the mark in the goal square, what's his name?
The
Melbourne player.
Brisbane game.
Yeah. Oh, Jake Lever.
Yeah. He took it.
That was very controversial.
On the line of the point post.
Yeah. But we've got a real issue at the moment with these, what they call close calls or close decisions with the ball coming through the goals. And time after time after time, we can see quite clearly, as I see it, an ex-player, that it's either a goal or it's touched or it's marked on the line. But they go to this big hullabaloo, and the umpire comes running in, talks to the goal umpire, then calls the big square, and up it goes to the broadcast, and back and forth. And some of the decisions, as we know, guys, are just terrible.
Yeah.
And it's time wasting too.
Yeah.
There was one good one on last round, though. Is it possible to get goal of the year when you don't know you've actually kicked it at the time?
Tim Membry.
Membry?
Who's a Tim Membry, yeah.
Magnificent goal, wasn't it?
The karate kick.
From just about every angle that was broadcast until they went to that slow-mo close-up.
Yeah.
I thought, you cannot pick that. Surely he's going to have to be a point. And then you saw the slow-mo and thought, I'll tell you what, that just about is the goal of the year. and he didn't even know it himself.
No, luck's a fortune, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I've always said it'll come. When you get a final and this sort of thing happens in a final, particularly a grand final, oh, my God, there's going to be some trouble, because if that decision is wrong, oh, geez.
Oh, exactly. I mean, and for the sake of the umpire, the AFL going out and buying a bunch of high-definition GoPros and sticking them all over the goalpost, which in a grand final, it's one game. It's 8 posts. Let's say 16 GoPros.
Yeah.
It's not. They spend more on Brian Adams coming out here than they will on making sure that the game's officiated correctly.
Yeah. We talk about the umpires, and Clarkson's had a bit of a go at them, and you can see as we look over all those things I've just discussed. And the other one at the moment too is, it stands out, and they showed it, which was Carlton, North Melbourne, and Cripps being handled, and mishandled and manhandled time and time again, and no free kick being paid. And I think he's a Brownlow medalist eventually if he gets a chance. But I just finding that very frustrating that he's doing everything right to attack the ball and get the ball, and he's just being grabbed in every possible position and held back. And the umpires aren't seeing it or aren't paying it.
Rene.
They've played that tune before Carlton, haven't they?
What's that?
They did it with Judd as well. Oh, they grab him. They go sort it out on the field, mate. There's 3 umpires. You've got your own physical wherewithal, and you've got teammates. If you think
Silvani got away with it
if you think you're the first player to get tagged and scragged, you fair dinkum live in a vacuum. And I'm not blaming Cripps. I'm blaming people around him. You know, let the kid sort it out, let the umpire sort it out. But fair dinkum, he ain't the first, and he's not going to be the last.
No, he's not. But it's just making the game ugly by not allowing a quality player do his thing, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, he's got to sort it out. He's got to work it out. I mean, every other good player works it out. They work it out. He'll work it out. He's a good player. Yeah. He's a very good player. And the umpires are there. They got to keep an eye on it as well.
And there's that many of them now. Now, gentlemen, just to get away from some of the games, what do you make of the news out of Queensland today about 3 of the clubs maybe copping a reasonable fine because nothing that any of the players or officials have done, but their families have done off the field? What do you make of all that sort of stuff?
Well, one was the grandparents grabbed one of the kids and took it to one of the theme parks, and then brought it back to whoever the player was and his wife, and of course, being in the theme park, you just never know how that kid or kids, whoever they were, could have caught a corona, and next one there's big trouble. So I can see the AFL's reasoning for it.
Or it could have been worse. They could have taken the kids on the log ride, but they didn't do that.
Oh, that's lovely, Sergio. A pretty draconian penalty being handed down by the AFL. I mean, I've got to say, they've come down very heavy-handed.
Have they announced the penalties yet, Finey?
Yeah, that kid's not allowed. No, that kid's not allowed to go to SeaWorld till he's 21. The girlfriend's not allowed to go to a beauty salon. 5 years, any beauty salon. She can get her nails done, but no waxing whatsoever. And the North Melbourne Wives, have you heard their penalty?
No.
They're now forced to go to every game for the rest of the
season. Why is this draconian on every level? What about Rebecca Judd? She was in the news today. I think all news should be filtered through Rebecca Judd. I don't know what you blokes think, but she was pretty upset today that there's a loophole in the coronavirus rules that states that if you do test positive, you are allowed to leave the house to exercise. She wasn't too happy about that today. And I rarely say this, but she might have a bit of a point.
Yeah, if you're exercising, you're breathing out more, you're coughing, and I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be overly wrapped if someone ran past me with coronavirus.
Yeah, well, apparently, according to the Victorian constitutional rights, which I didn't know Victoria actually had a constitution, but apparently that we do, that you cannot keep people in their house because it becomes like a prison, right? So even if you do test positive to the virus, you are allowed to go outside to exercise. And Rebecca wasn't too happy about that today. So
yeah, I think what Rebecca's saying is correct, but I would not be taking any COVID advice from somebody that thinks that Botox is an essential service.
All coming off for a long run tonight. What about some of the games coming up this weekend, gentlemen?
I just want to talk about Clarko.
Yes.
You know Clarko well, Campbell.
Yep.
You know the Clarkos of this world, Rene.
Yes, certainly do.
And you were not at the Battle of London, but I know that you're a big fan of Ian Aitkins, Serge, so you'll be interested in this. Now, He's no fool, as you know. This is a man who went away, looked at football, redesigned it, and won 4 premierships. And he is now on a weekly basis saying something stupid. And I reckon it's not accidental. You know, after the Sydney games, he has a go at Tom Papley. That's not Clarko-like. What he said today was ridiculous. Oh, we were 3-1 before we went into the hub. Now we're 3 and 5.
Yeah.
You work it
what I've done wrong.
Work it out. The hub's no good for us.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows that sounds stupid. And I reckon here's a bloke who's contracted till 2022. There's no reason he shouldn't be there next year other than a mutual agreement between the club and himself. Take Kennett out of it, but his currency is greater now. Your currency is greater when there's still a year to run on your contract.
Yep.
If GWS were not to make the top 4 this year and the word filtered to the AFL that Clarko was available, he might get one big lucrative contract. And that may not be the case next year. I just think the way he's talking, I reckon he wants out. He's a clever bloke, Clarko, and this is madness, some of the stuff what he said today is just, you know.
He is a master of deferral too. And because he tends to, I just assuming this, that he tends to know that if he says something a little bit outrageous, if he bags Tom Papley, who's just carved up his entire backline for the entire match, if he bags Tom Papley, that's going to be the story, not the fact that none of his backmen could keep up with him, you know, and he defers it beautifully like that. But I
Campbell, what do you reckon? Knowing the bloke, could this be an exit strategy?
No, definitely not. It'd be just a deflection strategy. They've got some issues. Their ball movement's slow. Obviously, it's the oldest list in the competition, and he probably knows there's a few issues there, and their performance is poor. So, I think he'll see his contract out for sure. Whether he renews at Hawthorn or not, it's another thing. But if a side was looking for a senior coach, he'd obviously be one of the first in the line. And I reckon he could do a great job with the Melbourne list.
Yeah, the 17 other clubs would have him in a heartbeat. I'd have him at Melbourne.
He'd be unbelievable at Melbourne, I reckon.
Yeah, with a talented list.
Yeah, with a former Melbourne man, but he doesn't usually make excuses. So what he said today was a little bit unusual, Finey, but he will certainly put a few senior blokes on notice this week, I reckon.
And I mean, Hawthorn, this is a club that we know, well, in my lifetime, there's been none better on and off field. You've got Don Scott saying that salary cap stuff, every week, Hawthorn people and just anybody must be sitting in trepidation as what's going to come off that podcast.
That podcast caused more trouble than good, hasn't it?
It's un-Hawthorn-like, I'll say that much.
Yeah, from my point of view, from a player, I find it very, very strange that Don Scott would come out and say something like that. Is it to be controversial, or has he got a gripe to bear?
Yeah, well, he doesn't get on that well with Kennett and the board there. I know that. So, maybe he just got caught up. You hear it a lot. People on podcasts saying things that they would never say usually to free-to-air, television or an interview or something. But when you're sitting there with a couple of mates and you've got Sam and Mike and you're probably in a relaxed environment, you might go down a path that you usually wouldn't and not understand them. I'm sure he understands the ramifications of it, but shit, it's hard to prove, and it's almost, why would you go down that path?
True, I know.
Yeah, very true.
Now, gentlemen, just to wind this thing up a little, let's have a look at some of the games coming up over this coming weekend. We've got a bunch more. Tomorrow, Carlton Hawthorn. You'd have to think if Carlton even think they're even close to being the real deal, they have to take care of Hawthorn tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm looking at Carlton as a side on the up because their young players are playing well, and they're just playing a nice style of football which suits. So I believe they'll be a little bit too quick for Hawthorn.
Much better team, Hawthorn, this week. They've got Bruce back, O'Brien back, Segler. The unusual career of Keegan Brooksby is on hold again.
Essendon, Brisbane. What do we make of this one, boys?
I think Brisbane will smash them. Essendon only just fell across the line against Adelaide, who haven't won a game this year, and you could argue that if they'd have kicked straight, they would have knocked them off. So I feel like Essendon are very ripe for the pickings this week, and I think they'll get beaten convincingly.
Yeah, well, I'm happy because I live with Craig Stewart, and his son James has got his first game for the year, so he's 6'5", and he's nice and fit, ready to go because he had osteopubis alongside Danaher, but he's sort of come good first. I think Danaher's still struggling from what I believe, so I'm looking forward to him being another big tall, and I believe they've needed talls on their forward line, Essendon, because they look to me a very small side over the last 5-6 weeks in particular. So I'm looking forward to the game in particular. But Brisbane are terrific the way they're being coached.
Now there's 33 games in 20 days. If there's one of those that you want to miss, it's going to
just on Essendon and Brisbane. Essendon, Malavai, Washington.
Malavai, Washington. There's a name.
Yeah. You remember him?
No.
He made a Wimbledon final.
I was just about to say US Open final. No, Wimbledon.
Wimbledon final.
Yeah.
He could fair dinkum. He wasn't good enough to hit. He wasn't good enough to hit up with the ball boys normally, but he just occasionally you get a run and you just play certain plays at the right time and all the seeds, and he got all the way through. Now Essendon's 5 and what they got 5 wins, do they, out of 7?
Yeah, I think so. 5.
Yeah,
5
they're not worth because of injuries. They're not worth pigs and shit. I mean, you wouldn't tip them in a month of Sundays.
True. We'll ignore Northern Adelaide and move on to St Kilda, Sydney. Fine.
Poor Northern Adelaide. Oh, except Magic Door. That's a good story.
Oh, it's a good story. Good to see him back.
Yep.
Your Saints surely would have to take care of Sydney too, Finey.
Yeah, they look a little bit hamstrung. They've been forced out of Sydney, which is... It's interesting. It's the Pride game being played on the Gold Coast. I don't know what the bikers will make of that. Are they going to support the annual Pride game? It makes more sense down in Sydney or near St Kilda in Melbourne. I'm not quite sure if the Banditos are going to support the Pride game, but I don't think so.
Oh, the Banditos might sell a bit of gear at the Pride game. You never know.
Yeah, they're different sort of leather.
Yeah, I'm going against you, Finey. I like Sydney because the last couple of weeks Sydney have taken the game on and just ramped it up a little bit and had a bit more of a go and using the ball a lot better, running a lot quicker. I like Sydney.
You're right. Hawthorn at home, that's better than beating the top team away.
Well, it's a win anyway.
West Coast Geelong, gentlemen.
I think West Coast are the bet of the round.
Yeah, you'd think so. You would think so. Because Selwood's still not back,
Nah, it was good that Hawkins got off. That was important for him. But I think the bookies put up a line of 16.5 points. So I'm not sure if that's changed now, but I'm expecting the Eagles to win that game pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I think you're right, Brownie.
Did you ever appeal any of your reports, Campbell?
I couldn't, because the medical reports were the sticking point with me. I could say that I didn't make contact to the head, but when all the medical reports said that he had delayed onset of concussion and memory loss and bloody stiff neck and all these sort of things, you don't have a lot of room to move on a legal front, Finey.
Your decisions generally got the Crown's appealing against the leniency of the sentence.
I'll give you two words for most of yours, Brownie. Blood rule. Hey, Sunday, Gold Coast versus GWS. Could be actually a pretty good game, this, I reckon.
No, I've got to pick GWS. You know, that form, that's a good win against Richmond if you measure it up now.
Yeah.
They're still a bit inconsistent this year, the Giants.
No, I think you find if Toby Green plays, they go right.
Yeah, very true. And the final game of the round, Freo Collingwood.
I'll jump in here because it's over there at Fremantle, of course, and look, they'll be very hard to beat because they're not far off it. They've won a couple, haven't they? And we need to really, if we're going to be in the top 3 or 4 or 5 going towards the end of the season, we really need to win this. So, Grundy really has to pick his game up too. He really does. So, I like us against the Dockers.
Yeah. They just struggle to score, don't they? If Tabern's not marking and kicking goals, they don't have too many other avenues, Finey, Fremantle. And, I mean, it showed in the wet.
With Walters out, he looks like he's not playing. And
yeah.
After Fredericks missed those 2 shots at goal before half-time, I thought they're not going to get one. But they did get a couple. I was thinking, Rene, when you played, you finished your career with a handful of games at St Kilda, a season or 2 at Essendon. But I reckon, had you played in the AFL era, you definitely would have been one of those blokes like Campbell. You would have gone to the Gold Coast, and I reckon you would have ended up at Fremantle. And I would have loved to have seen you in the purple. You would have looked like a family block of Cadbury chocolate.
Well, look, Kink got married in pink, so, I could have changed and gone to purple, so no problem.
Rene with the big anchor, the big purple, the purple people eater coming off the halfback flank.
I was running around with an anchor on me back at the end of my career. You better believe it. Especially your best mate, Steve, Kevin Sheedy.
Now, gentlemen, thanks for that this week with the Takeover Footy Wrap. I think we've had a look at most of these things that's been going on. And
it's gone for 45 minutes and Melbourne haven't kicked a goal.
Oh, yeah, thanks for that, Finey. Okay, so we'll get back to you. We'll see you next week and see what's happening in this magnificent festival of football that's going on for the next 3 weeks.
See you, lads. Enjoy. Take care.
Good on you.
Great to see you.